Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the panel on Fannish time capsules. What we're going to do is we're going to start by everybody will introduce themselves. Then we'll talk a bit about 1957 and what sort of time capsule we could hope for from then. And then we'll talk about what sort of time capsule we might put in for a convention 60 or 70 years in the future. There may be some discussion of format and format wars, but we won't get too much into that because, you know, some members of the panel think that's a bit. Okay, minor introductions. Fran, do you want to start?
I do. I'm Fran Dowd. I've been the sofa of Easter cons going back to the first bid that I presented, I think it was 96. So I've got some clue about how EasterCon history has gone in the past 20 years or so. Yeah, I'd like talking to people about stuff.
Okay, Geri?
Hi, I'm Geri Sullivan. I am the Yank here from Wales, the one in Massachusetts. I have been to one in-person EasterCon and one virtual EasterCon, but I like Kipple and stuff and history, so I like the fun parts of fandom, and I think time capsules are a lot of fun.
Okay, Tony.
Hi, I'm Benny Keane. I'm here because I want to write an article based on a historical investigation into what actually happened at Kettering in 1957, which was published in the late Pete Weston's fanzine Prolapse. And I'm going to put a link to that particular issue up in the chat if anybody wants to read more.
Okay. And Rob?
Hi there, my name's Rob Hansen. I'm from Wales, the real one. I've been involved in fandom since 1975, done all manner of fanzines, been on the panels, on the committees of a couple of conventions, but convention running was never really my thing. But I'm probably best known these days for my historical work into the history of fandom. So that's who I am.
Okay, and I've just realized I've forgotten to introduce myself. I'm Pat McMurray. I've been involved with EasterCons for a very long time. In fact, I was one of the committee of 1996 when Fran was presenting her bid. I'm also had a lot of interest in Fannish history. And one of the most 1957 wasn't chosen for this panel randomly. It's quite an interesting year. It was the third of 4 years in which Certicon, I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Citricon 1 to 4 were run in Kettering from 1955 to 58. Number 3 was quite mysterious because it was left out of the official list, and for a while when I joined fandom there was some debate as to whether or not it had actually existed, but I think we've got beyond that now.
Yeah, I think we did the research that I did was enough to demonstrate that it had definitely taken place, even though Ken Bulmer couldn't remember it.
Mm.
There were con reports, weren't there? There were fanzine articles that said.
There were a couple of con reports.
Right. Plus, Ina Shorrock was given awarded a trophy there, where it was actually inscribed on the base of the trophy that it was awarded to her at Kettering in 1957. So that was actual physical proof as opposed to just literary proof.
Okay, but wasn't there something about we've never found badges, but there might be good reasons for why not a lot of effort was put into that particular EasterCon, Fran?
Yeah, because
1957 was the first Worldcon held outside the States, and it was in London. And because of the nature of British fandom at the time, a lot of the people who would have been involved in running Kettering, and Pat and I both know what it's like to be the person put in the frame to run an EasterCon in a British Worldcon convention year. We've both. Have you done it before, Pat, or are you planning? I know you're planning 24.
No, I've done it before.
And yeah, and it makes for a radically different EasterCon. and I can see how people weren't putting the effort into some of the more bureaucratic things, like printing a program book and that kind of stuff.
All right, so here we are, Geri. We've got our box of some sort. We'll talk about what the box looks like and how it's been preserved, because I think that's interesting stuff as well. But Geri, we've got a box sitting here in front of us. We're about to open. What sort of things do you hope you're going to find in it?
I want to find at least one water pistol.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And yes, I would like to find some convention reports. I know that Rob in the Creative Random Harris volume that he and Dave Langford put together, we have Chuck's 1955 Kettering report. But I want to see some reports from it.
What about mementos, badges, photographs?
There weren't any.
Sorry,
there weren't any. None of the
badges.
None of the Kettering conventions had either badges or program books. In fact, the actual World 57 in the 57 Worldcon didn't have badges. They just had cardboard blanks that you wrote your name on. Badges, as we know them these days, were a somewhat later innovation.
Okay. Do we even know who was at the 57? Who was at that EasterCon, or who typically went to EasterCons in the 50s?
We have got quite a good, a reasonable list of who we think was at that EasterCon. It's in the article that I wrote, and we think, where are we? Right. Yes, we think that the following were definitely present. Eric Bentcliffe, Les Childs, Audrey Eversfield, John Humphreys, Terry Jeeves, Dave Jenrette, Rusty Jenrette, Eric Jones, Margaret Jones, Ken McIntyre, Archie Mercer, Peter Reaney, Bob Richardson, Lawrence Sandy Sandfield, Jeff and Eunice Shattuck, Ken Slater, Ted Tubb, Jill and Cyril Whittaker, and Jack Wilson. Knighted in the Order of St. Anthony were Ron Bennett, Bill Harry, Eddie Jones, Dave Newman, Ina Shorrock, Norman Shorrock, John Owen, John Rolls, and Norman Weedle, and we think they were all there. And possibly a few others. Brian Burgess might have been there. We know that Peter Maybe wasn't. We know that Ken Slater wasn't.
Right. So among the things I would really love, especially if they knew that, if a group knew it was doing a time capsule, I don't know if autograph books were big in the UK by the late, in the late 50s, or if they came later. I know in the States, they were big in the 1960s. But I would absolutely love to see an autograph book where the members of the convention wrote little notes to the future or little pieces of art that they sent off to the future to go into the time capsule. That would be so cool.
I mean, if you're thinking about if people were deliberately creating a time capsule as, to commemorate the LundCon coming up, these are the sorts of things they'd put in. They might try and take, I know filming with not Super 8, but that really early format was quite widespread, quite often done by in the 50s by people.
Right, but the first films ever presented at a British convention with the 57 Worldcon. So whether they'd actually had any of those ready by the Easter, I don't know.
They might have done some test by then.
Sorry, what? They
might have done some test by then.
Possibly, yeah. Because I say there were 3 films that were played at the London Worldcon. They were, let's see, what were they? May We Have the Pleasure and Fans Are Poppin' from the Liverpool group. And there was a St. Anthony film from the Cheltenham group. So that was the first 3 films ever played at a British convention.
No, the Liverpool group certainly seems to have been into doing lots of stuff like that. Because if you look at what we do know about the other Kettering conventions, a big thing was the Liverpool group bringing their reel-to-reel tapes.
Exactly.
And they did lots of radio plays, dramatizations, readings. I'd like some of that. And this is where we get into the format wars, because reel-to-reel tapes are
we can
not
still
we've still got them. Those two Yeah, those two they did the March of Slime and Last and First Fen were the two dramas they did at the 55 and 56 conventions. So putting them as a reel-to-reel tape in the time capsule would have worked, because I've still got them now and they've been transferred subsequently to digital, and they're now available online. So
yes, it's whether they last in the box. That's
true. There is that.
That's the real format wars, is whether it's usable.
If this time capsule is going to represent the 57 Kettering Con, then probably what it ought to have mostly in is lots of St. Fannish stuff and lots of packs of cards. And that seems to be most of what happened.
They played a lot of brag. That seems to be a lot.
You know, what I would love to see is, I'd love to see the ephemera. I'd like to see the breakfast menu. I'd like to see people's hotel bills. I'd like to see train tickets and maybe local newspapers or any cuttings about the convention. I'd love to see all of these stuff that if it hasn't, you know, we have, I think we have a pretty much complete set of official publications of conventions, stretching back to pretty much the beginning, but all this ephemeral stuff doesn't really exist.
Because there's a lovely map. I think might be for the 58th one. I can't remember. Yes, because didn't the 58 one have to move? It wasn't actually in Kettering, wasn't there? One of them.
The 55, 56, 57, 58 were all in the George Hotel in Kettering. The one that had to move was 1960 in London. They had to move hotel. And
they published a map and it said this is like restaurants, places where you can, garages where you can park your car, and ladies' toilets.
Just ladies?
Well, see, if you were going to a pub in those days, a lot of them didn't have ladies' toilets.
Oh, good grief.
You got directed out into the street and had to find the nearest public convenience or use the yard. But there were a lot of places that didn't have ladies' toilets. So if you were a mixed group.
How many women just went ahead and used the men's?
I don't know. There would have been men that would have made that very difficult. But there's all sorts of things. I'm reading some of the kind of the joining material for things. There were things like, if you're coming by car, there was no expectation that a hotel had any parking, especially if it was in a town. There might be what would have been livery stables and was now a garage that would park your car up for you for the weekend. There was the whole ladies' toilets issue. But the whole way that a post-war hotel in Britain worked completely differently. This concept that there wasn't a bar, or very often wasn't a bar, there would be a residence lounge.
Right.
Where you could go and sit and you could do what you wanted. You could have your own booze, you could play brag for money all through the night. Unless it was taken off you, you could play your guitar. And every so often a waiter or a night porter would stick their head in and bring a tray of drinks or sandwiches if required. But there wasn't anything like a public bar that we would recognize now. So it's odd things that people don't, it's so normal for you that you don't think, I should put this in a time capsule. Why would you write down how a hotel bar works? It's like everybody knows.
You might, for example, well, I don't know if I was put, we won't drift into that conversation yet, but I'd include ephemera from a convention if I was trying to put together a time capsule, but I don't know. Is that typical of what you find in time capsules, Tony? Do you have any?
Well, I don't know, and I don't have a lot of experience with time
I mean,
capsules.
the impression I get is when they open a time capsule, they find, you know, they always seem to find a copy of the local newspaper, plus basically whatever random stuff everybody thought to put in.
Yeah.
Mostly put together by school kids.
Yeah, it's sort of, my memory of sort of what Blue Peter used to load into their time capsules is rather sort of disappeared, but it would be, it would be stuff that they thought it wouldn't be the ephemera, it would be stuff that they thought said something about the convention, which, as I say, the only thing that seems to have happened at the 57 con was the first St. Anthony ceremony. There's no other programming at all. I mean, it's very interesting. You read Dave Jenrett's con report, and he and his wife walked into the hotel and nearly walked out again because they couldn't see anybody who looked Fannish.
Right. The thing to remember is, again, the numbers who were attending conventions were falling all through the Kettering conventions, which is one of the reasons why they started the BSFA. They said, well, fandom's dying here, we need to get more people in. But again, those 4 conventions, they were basically not Easter cons in any sense as we understand them now. They were basically small relaxer cons. So people went there, they were the actual programming was deliberately minimal, and they just sat around and chatted and played cards. Fine if you know everybody, but if you're a newcomer coming into that, what is there for you? Nothing. Which is why the 59 convention was so different. That was them saying, well, Christ, we've got to pull ourselves together and put something on that'll attract newcomers.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear that the 57 nearly didn't happen at all. For the reason that Fran has mentioned, that all the London people were involved in running the 57 London WorldCon, and it was the opinion of the London, as far as we could tell, it's the opinion of the London fans that this should be the only event of the year,
right?
And there shouldn't be anything at Easter. The Liverpool fans seem to have taken a slightly different view on this, and Kettering is notable. 57 Kettering is notable for the absence of London fans. London fans basically didn't go. It's entirely put together by Liverpool fans who felt Liverpool, and I guess to a lesser extent Cheltenham and some fans who felt that they were a bit excluded from London.
There's something else to bear in mind that's odd about the 57 convention as well. Had we not won the 57 WorldCon, they were planning on making it, rather than an Easter con, they were going to make it the second international convention, because the first international convention was in 51, which is essentially a Eurocon. And there were plans afoot that if we'd have lost the bid, then this was again going to be scaled up and it would be the second international convention. In fact, that's what they were going to call it. It was going to be the second international convention. But of course, that's a parallel universe that never actually came to pass.
Okay, because by then EasterCons had only been going for 7 or 8 years. One of them was replaced with Festivention. They moved from Whitsun to Easter more or less randomly. It must have seemed quite a maybe we'll carry on doing this and maybe we won't. You could picture them saying, right, we want people in 50 years' time to know what we've been doing, and they just chuck all sorts of weird things from the previous decade of conventions into it.
And
the program.
We talked about this in the regional fandoms panel, that we've lost that sense that national conventions were gatherings of regional groups.
Yeah,
that you went as a contingent from your region, which meant you gave each other lifts. You'd got hotel rooms. You had people dotting on the floor who couldn't afford it. You put on program items like Liverpool did as a group, and that was in a period of transition, I think. Then, and we know there was a Sheffield group at that time, but the only person that we really know was in it was Terry, and of course he's long gone.
Exactly.
We have no records, But there were lots of photographs of things like they would have regular competitive quiz nights with a group in Matlock. But the whole idea of a national convention was like it is to a certain extent in America. There's that strata of local small events that we've sort of lost in Britain, and that people then from then met together at the national one.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the Eastercon was basically a gathering of the clans, and there was a very strong, as you say, local identity to local groups, which I think has been somewhat lost in this age of the internet because everybody's so much more connected. But anyway, so regional group identity was very strong, prior to the advent of the internet, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and it did. And certainly in '57, there was a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of rivalry and downright hostility in some respects between basically London and everybody else.
Pretty much so, yeah. By the end of the '50s, London was pretty much on the outs with almost everybody. Yeah, it all came to a head at the London Symposium, which split London fandom in two.
Sounds like New York fandom back in the day.
Fannish wars, huh?
Yep.
All right. So, I think I can think of things I'd love to have seen in that capsule. Geri's just put a link. In fact, Mark Plummer has put a link into a 1965 time capsule as well. And Geri put in one for a 1996 time capsule. So
in 1992 from MagicCon that was opened in 2018. And there's some pictures. And, there's a bunch of paper objects that they put up on the wall, but they have like the water bottle, and there's a golf tee, and they put in one of the Hugo Awards, and all sorts of items from that Worldcon.
Yes, I think if they had a metal box or somebody's locker from military service or something, and just dumping stuff in it, you'd find glasses, you'd find packs of cards, you'd find maybe business cards and ties and all sorts of things.
Yeah, a few years later, you'd have probably found one of Brian Burgess's pork pies.
I mean, you hope they'd remember to put in photographs in local newspapers and things, but this does not sound like the sort of event that would be reported in the local newspaper either.
So I'm curious, Mark's quote about information about the 1965 time capsule, was that from when they moved out of Oblique House?
That was exactly it, yeah.
Buried under the cherry tree? That cherry tree is still there, and the current owner knows that a time capsule was buried there, but we don't know if he's gone looking for it. We should actually give this information to Tommy Ferguson to send to him, because he'd be curious to know.
You're basically inviting him to dig it up in the dead of night, you?
Fran has just put in the Blue Peter capsule contents over the years, and I took a quick look, and the first thing I spotted was they included some of Goldie's hair, from which they could probably clone her at this point. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, imagine if there were samples of hair from 1950s fans that they could be cloned. And, and all these 1950s fans come back with their lovely ties and things.
Robert Lichtman had red bogs, very curly hair, had an envelope full of that. So we could bring him back too. Wow. Scary thought. Scary thought.
Yeah. But there were no BSFA awards because there was no BSFA. There were no Hugos because, I'm not even sure if 1957 Worldcon had Hugos. Can't remember. I don't think they did, actually.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yeah. There's photographs. There's photographs on the website if you can have a look. Yeah. Okay.
You have too much knowledge, Rob. It's very intimidating sometimes.
Okay. But that's what I do. So.
Okay.
Year number 4 for the Hugos, 57.
All right. Okay. So shall we talk about what we'd put in a capsule to go downstream for 50 or 60 years? I mean, let's start off with we've got to have a conversation about what sort of future are we thinking of? Are we thinking about, a howling wilderness with an Eastercon of 12 people in a fortified hotel somewhere in the Midlands? Are we talking about a wonderful future where they can take any piece of old technology we sent to them, virtualize it, and make it all work again? different sorts of capsules.
In the first case, I think putting some boxes of matches in would be quite useful. Post-apocalyptic, yeah.
Tins of
And
baked
more
beans.
plots.
Tins of baked beans. Yeah.
Why
think we need
not
to
one of those light-up lights?
I think we need to look forward to an actual advanced future rather than a retro.
There was a short story. Oh God, I cannot remember who it was by, about a world in which we'd gone backwards, and somebody went to Worldcon. Took them 3 years to get there by ship or something. Yeah, might have been Rogers of Lasney or something. But this was ages ago.
Well, if we'll have time travel by then, we can, sneak in, and anything we forgot to put in the time capsule, insert at the last moment before they open it.
And
Go back to Kettering in '57 and run some programming.
Yeah. If you see any odd people wandering around an Instacon, maybe they really are from the future come to fix the time capsule.
Right.
How would you tell?
We'd certainly like to think they could still read, because a lot of what we would consider ephemera, memorabilia, whatever, is actually written material, whether that's printed or on some kind of storage media. So we'd like to think we could write stuff down.
Yeah. The beer list, the beer list of, what got served in the beer and cider. Weetabix, is that too generalized to Brit fandom right now? But, it's like.
Oh, right.
Pardon?
Sorry, no, it took me a second to realize why you were mentioning Weetabix. Sorry.
Well, Weetabix and the fanzines that go along with the Weetabix to help explain that, yes, at this time, certain members of Brit fandom were having a lot of fun with Weetabix.
That's one of the problems actually with old stuff, is the fact that in-jokes, because like 50 years on, even with old fanzines, sometimes if you were printing an article or something, you have to put footnotes just to explain some of the references that don't mean anything anymore. So,
well, that's again, the 57 Kettering Cod is a good example of that, because one of the con reports from that is by Sandra Lawrence, who we all think is either
Sandy Sandfield.
It's either Sandy Sandfield writing under a pseudonym, or it's somebody parodying Sandy Sandfield. And we don't know what, and it's full of jokes that we don't understand.
It's written as a parody of a column in a ladies' society magazine, which is a very odd way of reporting a convention.
So I want that autograph book. And one of my questions in terms of current day fandom compared with 57 is then it was the regional groups that were really strong. And at this point, what we have are the different groups are the different Fannish interests, the people who are really into gaming and the people who are really into filk and old farts who are really into fanzines and all the different, it's like a current EasterCon is going to have a big presence from the Glasgow and 24 bid. So I put in stuff, from their really spiff artwork, but capturing the art, capturing kind of all the different interests, putting some of these custom 3D printed dice in and things like that.
Someone just suggested in the chat, putting in a copy of a code of conduct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who knows how many years in future people will look at this and go, they did what? So
that was my very first, when I was thinking what would go in, that was the very first thing that I thought of was in terms of representing what, concerns of current fandom would be to put in the code of conduct.
They had no code of conduct about hair. How could they not specify how you were supposed to wear your hair? Or whatever, yes.
And the forms that we fill out, if you want to volunteer for a convention, the sort of things that you get asked, because that has changed considerably over my conventional lifetime, and I would find that interesting.
I think, the obvious things to put into to a time capsule would be, the official publications, so
programs,
readmes, the PRs,
the newsletters.
the newsletters, documentation like that. I think you might well stick in copies of the BSFA winners. You'd have a novel, copy of the short story, copy of whatever non-fiction thing. So those would be sort of representative of the convention.
I mean, you can see, you can imagine if we were doing this for real at an EasterCon in a couple of years' time. I am not volunteering. This is just the hypothesis, okay? We're not volunteering. But you could say what we're going to do is we're going to take an oil drum. We want people to bring along anything they think is representative of them or their fandom or the EasterCon. We'll put it in there. We'll then pump it full of helium or nitrogen or whatever it is you need to spoil it. To preserve it, preserve it. Then we'll seal the drum, we'll bury it, and let some other poor sods dig it up in 60 years' time. So and you can see that people bring along all sorts of things. I bet there'd be a few dice put in there, for example.
And going back to this, things that we don't think are going to get lost. And what Tony was saying, and is in the convention reports, that they played brag the entire time. Not just a deck of cards, but also the rules for brag, because nobody knows. It's like when you read George Hare novels and they're playing PK and things, and the James Bond and the Baccarat. Nobody knows.
I know Werewolf seems like the sort of game that people will always know how to play, but I bet you in 2 generations' time, people will
don't.
There's this game called Werewolf, which people used to play all night long. And what was it about? How was it played?
And I was on a panel once about past EasterCons, and a bee I've had in my bonnet for a long time is people who tell you EasterCon is the serious literary convention. Bugger it. No, it's not. And I actually went back when I was on that panel. I looked at the year that I was born, which was 1959, the program, what was on at the time that we were having this History of EasterCon program. And it was a tea duel.
That's right.
And everyone said, oh, I know what that is. That's where you dunk the biscuits and the chips. No, a tea duel is where you all sit around a table and you drink tea.
Yep.
And the last person to piss themselves wins. It's really, really simple. But that's it. We've already got this dichotomy of 2 kinds of tea duel. And what a tea duel is going to be like in 2057, it's going to be, can you tell your lapsang from your Earl Grey blindfold?
It'll be tea-powered lightsabers.
It's things we assume people will know, and they won't.
Well, you're right. In terms of, there's a contest, I don't know, they still held at EasterCons, but for a while there was a contest about transporting a pork pie from one end of a hall to the other. Yeah. Now, a lot of people, I would bet, would probably think, why a pork pie? We know why a pork pie if we remember Brian Burgess, but Brian Burgess died a long time ago now.
So Fran made a comment a little bit ago about the forms we fill out and the information that it asks for. Minstiff did Rune sent out a survey to everybody at a mini-con one year when Rune went to everybody that went to mini-con. And I found copies of these returned surveys, and it was like 3 pages of, both, your favorite science fiction book and things like that. But they asked people their height and their weight, and people filled it in on the form. And we've got like Roger Zelazny's form that he filled out.
Wow.
And those were just fascinating to read. But the questions that were asked and looking at them, I looked at these forms 20 years ago when they were, already, 30 years old. And I was just shocked at they asked what, and how would that go over these days? So it would be interesting to come up with a list of the questions for a survey.
Bridget Bradshaw has suggested that, of course, everyone will know what fish slapping involved, And for that matter, we don't need to bother with the rules of Mornington Crescent because, of course, everybody will know how to play that in 50 years' time.
Indeed.
Oh, done them badly with the Bitcoin wallet.
Yeah, yeah. What I would like to do is I'm interested in these. I just like I would love to have seen film made of a 1950s Eastercon. I would expect the people in the future would love to see what we looked like, what we did, what were the program items.
Yeah, definitely.
Try to put that sort of stuff in as well, and just assume that it's either howling wilderness or they do actually have the technology to read anything we've got, because we haven't really lost anything completely, have we? Despite changes in format.
Oh, changes in format? No. I mean, we physically lost it.
Yeah.
Like the very earliest film made in British fandom was in the 40s of the Cosmos Club in Teddington. They had a film of their members just messing around, long since lost.
Oh,
at the
but
57
we physically
Worldcon.
lost it, but we still had it. We could still watch it.
Yeah, we can still do it. Yeah, and similarly, Ted Carnell did. He had a cine camera and he went around filming stuff at the 57 Worldcon. As far as I'm aware, lost long since. So
can we play wire recordings?
We've got audio tapes in
right,
fandom,
but the wire recordings that they used to send around.
I know, yeah. Before there was tape, there was wire. I'm not aware of any of them surviving. No.
Ted White has cassette tapes that are transcriptions of wire recordings, but they're somewhere in his house, which means they need to be found.
Could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think probably the best recording we've got of Sheffield fandom is our wedding back in 1990, which Steve Lawson videoed for us, the wedding and the evening reception, where there was a concert and all kinds of, and most of Sheffield fandom at the time is on there in some way.
I think the earliest from a convention that I can think of in this country is only 87. I mean, I put out some CDs ages ago, DVDs, whatever it was, like several years ago, transferring all of them from film. Oh, Greg Pickersgill, that's right. He had the film that had been done sitting in a cupboard for ages, and he transferred them all onto disc, and then I edited them down from something like about 3 hours to 1.5 hours. I knocked them out to various people, so that at least should survive. But as far as I'm aware, none of that's available online, which it probably should be put on YouTube.
And there was that brief period when we were getting mobile phones and we had photo and video capability, and it was before people said, please don't record me without my express consent, and we all went around recording everybody. So there's that.
The comment about convention T-shirts, and also here in the US we do ribbons and kind of what the humorous ribbons were and stuff. I would, it's not EasterCon specific, but the T-shirt that I'm wearing right now, I would put into a time capsule. It's one of the Off-Worlds T-shirts, and on the back, I don't know if it's going to show or not, but it's a list of all of the World Cons and locations from 39 to this year, to 21. And I would put that in a time capsule in a minute. I mean, I expect that we're going to have that information, but 60 years from now, I believe we'll still have those historical records.
Right.
But the fact that we printed it on a T-shirt and had an object that had that list.
And in 1996, when we did Evolution, Sue Mason did us a fantastic T-shirt, which I haven't seen any of them for years. And she also did a fantastic one for Intuition with the dragon. Remember?
Yeah.
That went round from front to back. And
I still have my. In fact, I think I still got 2 Evolution T-shirts.
Oh my God!
And a volunteer T-shirt as well.
Oh my God! Don't ever
and
wear them.
Occasionally, I still wear them.
There was an Intuition mouse mat as well, with Sue Mason artwork, silver print on a blue floppy mouse mat.
Yeah.
And we had a box of those in the loft for years. I think we lost them when we moved.
In terms of
T-shirts, glasses, I had one of those confabulation moose glasses and broke the last one only a couple of years ago.
Tut.
So yeah.
in terms of T-shirts, we've been putting out, well, the Americans in particular have been putting out T-shirts at conventions for a long time. I think the earliest printed Fannish T-shirts I've got sitting in the house somewhere or other are from the early 80s. So they're not a new thing.
There was definitely one from Conspiracy in '79, because I don't have it, but I have seen that.
Yeah. Yes,
I
there
think
was.
not
79
necessarily.
The 79 con did as well. The 79 World Con had its T-shirts.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the T-shirts themselves, but certainly photographs of people wearing them. Because if you look at a lot of photographs from 1950s conventions, and it's the 50s, the men are all wearing suits, and the women have got usually quite tailored blouse and skirt or a suit or something like that. But nowadays we all wear Fannish T-shirts, whether they're actually convention T-shirts or Genki gear or slogans or whatever. And I think that might be interesting. If you've got an interesting T-shirt, come and have your photograph taken. We'll put them all on a CD or something and bung it in there, so that people.
Or better yet, if you've got a T-shirt you're willing to volunteer for the oil drum, let's do that. You know.
But they take up a lot of room, and what I'm thinking is,
what have you
got visualization of the whatever the artwork is on the T-shirt.
This needs cleaning, but it's a contrivance mug from Jersey, so that would have been what, 89?
Yes, it does. Yes, it definitely. Yes, it can't see much of it, but that's very impressive. But
yeah, no,
just
things on shelves. Yeah.
Oh dear, oh dear.
The whiskey tasting glass from Ian M. Banks's thing at Odyssey 2010. I've got mugs from Orbital Odyssey.
I'd have to go to another room to find my glasses, so I'm not abandoning the panel like that.
I would like this. I mean, it's like the stuff we've talked about, and you know, Alison just talked about, you know, merch is worn in human fashion. You know, it's very, you know, ephemeral, very time-based. I want things, you know, I want more kind of individual contributions that give us a sense of the people of the time. And one of the things I was thinking of just a little bit ago is it would be fun to have it for a kids program activity, for the kids to come up with, you know, stuff that they wanted to put in the time capsule and they wanted to look at, because those kids might actually then be ones opening it up 60 years from now.
Yeah.
I think that's more or less what Blue Peter did, and I think still continues to do every now and again. Get kids.
Yeah, they ask.
Yeah. And it's been very successful, you know.
I want apocryphal material in there.
Apocryphal?
Apocryphal material in there, like Ian Banks's Spider-Man suit.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I want is what cropped up in Family Fortunes last night, for those of you who didn't go, was it's quite interesting, because the survey had asked 100 people to name cities that EasterCons had been held in, and 3 people said Sheffield, and that was on the list, even though there has never been.
There's never been one.
But so many people from Sheffield have been involved in running them, presumably, that people just assume.
Surely, there must have been, yeah.
And that's something I would like to see, is 100 people surveyed to come up with answers. This is what they came up with.
Talking about stuff to put in, ephemera, that there you will see is from the 53 convention.
Wow.
Ticket. We've got your membership card for the 57 World Con. That's what you would fill in there. And indeed, for the 57 World Con again, there's a press pass. So
ooh,
nice.
They're the kind of things that perhaps you would want to put in.
We don't need a time capsule. We have your study, Rob.
Yeah, empty my study into it. Yeah, that's right.
We're quote cards and wide use then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clark started them in 50 something or other. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Certainly early 50s though. Yeah.
Yeah. Quote cards would be fun to find.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I often think about is when you go to an EasterCon or an OverCon, you get a bag and it's full of stuff and it's got a badge and a ribbon and a Doc Weir vote and a call costume vote and maybe some advertising if they've been organized enough to actually put it in the bag. And all those bags are dismantled and most of it's thrown away. And in 10 years' time, never mind 50, nobody knows what's in that bag or what typically is in that bag, you know? Unless somebody goes crazy and photographs it for Instagram and says, look at all the stuff I got. But you could imagine just, you know, you'd have a membership for the time capsule, and the time capsule membership would get everything that every other member had. I was asking a question about what is a court card?
It's a quote, QUOTE card. Rob, do you want to explain them?
Basically, they were literally little cards about the size of your little finger, on which was written a quote from a fanzine or something that was just kind of, it could be entirely random, and then they would just be distributed about the place. You know, so at conventions, and it was supposed to be amusing just in and of themselves. Chuck Harris reports one convention that after they'd finished a meal, as well as a tip, they put a quote card on the thing. So when the server came and picked up the money, they said it was funny to see him staring in puzzlement at this card and wondering what this cryptic thing could possibly mean.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there must be lots of stuff produced at and around EasterCons, like all the restaurant reviews that don't make it into the newsletter, for example. You know, lots of stuff that lots of stuff that kind of gets lost, like Tears in the Rain. You know,
right?
My experience.
There's a certain degree here to which that stuff is always going to get lost because nobody really cares enough to keep that stuff. I mean, this reminds me, I was at academic conference on science fiction television about 20 years ago now, and one of the academics was saying that he didn't want to. He was getting tired of sort of fan opinions about television. He wanted to hear the opinions of about television programs of the indifferent audience. And I thought, yeah, that sounds good, except the indifferent audience isn't going to give you that information because they don't care.
Exactly.
And I think there's always going to be this stuff about which people at the time don't care, and there's nothing really you can do about that.
Well, I'm curious about what cosplay tokens are, and then also the question about when did Groats start?
Okay, so cosplay tokens are basically okay. The way they use it at EasterCons is their cosplay tokens or hall tokens. We've given up on a masquerade. So what we masquerade or a costume presentation. So people wear hall costumes, typically on a Saturday, but at other times across the weekend, and you get 3 tokens in your membership, and you can give those tokens, and they bundle them up and hand them into ops, and there's a prize for that. So people are still getting value out of their costuming.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and people like Peter Harrow get grossly upset when people give them costume tokens because he dresses as a Victorian solicitor all the time. How dare you assume he's descended to the level of costume?
I'll be right back. I'm going to see if I can find something quickly.
I honestly do not know when Groats started. I cannot remember.
They've been in existence as long as I have been doing anything involved with actual running of an EasterCon. I think even back in '96 when I first volunteered, there were Groats kicking around then. I think
there were Groats at the '95 Worldcon, definitely.
And
how they're used and how it works has gotten a lot more sophisticated.
I don't think I was. I think I was quite. I might be making this up, but my first EasterCon was in 1993, and I'm fairly sure I was surprised when would have been Fiona Anderson was giving me these bits of paper that I could go buy beer with at the end of my shift. It was very nice.
Yeah.
I might be making that up or confusing that with a completely different year, you know?
Henry Balin just said that he remembers them in the 90s, but not in the 80s. And that does seem to accord with what people are saying here. So they appeared at some point in the 1990s.
I half think they were a Tim Illingworth introduction, and they might have come from the States. Yeah, but
We certainly didn't call them groats.
oh no, that's a Scottish invention. They were originally called Go for Reward tickets or something, and the first time we did it in Scotland, it's kind of seemed obvious.
Okay.
To turn into
That
groats.
makes sense.
So, yeah. See, there's a little bit of history. I know that they weren't originally groats, but
There you go.
But now they are.
So that's after 1980, so I wouldn't know anything about that.
Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes. Firstly, if you've got any questions from the chat, now's the time to ask. I'm afraid I haven't been looking at the Discord, bit of a busy thing.
Time to take questions.
I'll wait to see if any questions pop up. Anybody got some last comments?
I think we've covered most things, I think.
Okay, let me turn it round. Was it Tony mentioned that is one thing you definitely find in a time capsule from the 1950s would be cigarettes, you know?
It would be very much something that would be typical of the period that we wouldn't necessarily think of. If we went back to 57, everybody would just be smoking like chimneys.
Yeah, it was actually unusual to be a non-smoker back then. Now it's the opposite. It's very unusual to be a smoker at the con, etc.
And one of the Blue Peter time capsules had an insulin pen in it. So things like, from our point of view, metformin. Hands up a fan who hasn't got a pack of metformin somewhere in there.
I've got diabetes, but I don't have the metformin yet.
Chris O'Shea was gobsmacked when he came to our house once, and it's out on the table like a condiment, a big tub of metformin. But things like that, an EpiPen for peanut allergies. It's like there's going to be loads of those floating around a convention, and I would really hope that in our future they won't exist. We won't need them.
Yeah, Jonathan's suggestion of Fannish face masks is a great one. I've got some lovely ones I'd like to put in. SSRIs, yep. You might find that people in 60 years would be horrified that we drank alcohol or how much alcohol we took. So they'd open it and they'd find all these interesting science fictional beer cans and go, "Oh my God, how awful!" A can of craft beer, yeah.
I was trying to decide what would actually hold up over the time. So a good bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, that bottle of whiskey would be a better idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh no.
And then we could have a row
Bridget,
about
we don't hate the future that much enough to put straw in.
Yeah. Budweiser is that even worse?
And Gillian's suggestion about random creator stuff that gets left on tables. You know, the printed chapters and the arcs and the stuff that end up lying around that lots of people pick up, take home, and read, and never do anything with after that.
Badges. Alison Scott's badges with political slogans. Yeah, Tippecanoe and Tiger 2. That's like it's meaningless.
Yeah, we can stick a Union Jack in, and that'll be meaningless in 30 years' time.
But a demographic map showing where the members of that Easter con came from.
That'd be useful. Yeah.
Somebody suggested a letter of apology for the mess we'd made of the planet.
And all those little stickers that people put on their badges. They're never saved, So there's lots of good things. It is almost tempting to do this for real, isn't it? I'll go away and let my fellow co-chair hit me around the head for suggesting such a stupid idea later. All right, I shall we wrap it up there?
I think we should, because they want 10 minutes for the next thing, don't they?
All right. Listen, I want.
Hotel contract.
Hotel contract. Thank you, Bridget. Perfect suggestion to end on. Brilliant.
Mushrooms.
Listen, I want to thank everybody. Rob, Fran, Tony, Geri, it's been a fantastic panel. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise. You know?
Yeah.
Right,
Thank you
take
very
care.
much.
Sounds good.
Rachel, you can stop recording.